just put herself away. Well, I don't know why it's doing that. Is okay, so that's it. Recording is starting. Just give me a quick second. I'm sorry about that. I'm looking for the information. So yes, so good evening everyone once again, and bonsoir à tous et à toutes, and welcome to tonight's presentation of OTF Connects. Tonight's session is titled Media Literacy Ideas, Today's for Tomorrow, presented by Chelsea Atwell and Neil Anderson. This is our first session of 2018, and I hope that you all had a good and restful vacation. We have a fairly good group tonight, as I was just saying, with mostly participants coming from the southern part of the province. I would like to thank you all for taking time away from your families in order to join us tonight over OTF Connects. Je voudrais profiter de l'occasion pour souhaiter la bienvenue à nos collègues franco-ontariens. Cette session est en anglais, mais si vous désirez obtenir des informations en français, surtout n'hésitez pas à nous contacter par la suite. We are definitely thrilled to have each and every one of you with us tonight. It's also our absolute pleasure to welcome Chelsea Atwell and Neil Anderson. Chelsea is a primary and junior teacher with the Toronto District School Board. She's also a director with the Association for Media Literacy, and as well she's a media literacy specialist. She has taught kindergarten to grade 5, and Chelsea told me that she has a passion for teaching and experimenting with creative ways to use technology with her students, and she will be sharing all these creative ways with you tonight. Neil Anderson is the president of the Association for Media Literacy. He has taught primary to post-secondary media studies for over 30 years, including media study courses for York University and the University of Toronto. He has given keynotes and workshops across Canada as well as internationally. He has made movies. He has authored a number of textbooks and articles on the subject of media literacy. As I mentioned just earlier, it's an absolute pleasure to have Chelsea and Neil with us tonight. I believe it's going to be a really interesting session. So at this point, Chelsea, I will pass the microphone to you. So if you could just click on your talk button, and then you can start your presentation anytime you want. Thanks so much.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. Yeah, I'm excited to be here tonight with all of you, and we're going to talk about media literacy. So, Neil and I, when we were prepping for the presentation, we wanted to know who is in the room. So, Michelle talked to you a little bit before about the survey tools. So if you can just give you a minute to use the survey tool and let us know if you're either A, kindergarten teacher, B, a grade 1 teacher, C, a grade 2 teacher, D, a grade 3 teacher, or E, other. So maybe you do prep delivery, a consultant, maybe you're in more of an administration or coaching role. If you can just let us know, and then that way when we're having a chat tonight, Neil and I are better able to meet your needs and cater the presentation to what you might be looking for. So I'll just give you a minute to go ahead and do that. And if you need any help, you can use the chat box, and Michelle can help you out with that. Neil and I are working together on the presentation. So if I'm talking, Neil will be looking at the chat box, and if Neil's talking, then I'll be looking at the chat box. And I know Michelle is here too to assist us with any sort of questions that you have. So I'll give you a minute to do this.
Yes, I see that most of you have already answered, so that's great. And I see that Ina and Holly have not answered it. You have to click on the little A. It's located under your name to the right of the little hand. So you see there's a little hand, raise hand icon, and then right next to that there's a little A, and you can just select it. And then I'm going to now post the results and see what we are getting here. Just a second. Okay, here's what we have. So yeah, this is the distribution for tonight.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. So I see some kinder teachers in the room, and the other category when I was flipping through there is I noticed E. So a lot of you doing other roles. So I'm wondering in those other roles if you're supporting kindergarten, or if like in a prep position, or maybe if you're in more of that administration role. So maybe you're a principal, vice principal, a learning coach. If you can just type in the chat box what you are, that'd be great. And I see someone just wrote occasional teacher. So you're doing everything, any day. Perfect. Okay. So as you guys write your answers, we'll just keep going. I see teacher, librarian. So good. Okay. Again, just to have this a little bit more interactive, we were wondering what's your experience? So when you think about media literacy, because and again, we thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. We wanted to know what your experience is. So there's a couple of choices, and these are by no means, this is by no means an inclusive list. So if you can just pop in there what your experience is with teaching media literacy, and Michelle will help you out if you had a question on that.
Yes, so you're using the tool located at the bottom of the vertical tool strip. So if you remember, there should be a vertical tool strip for you guys somewhere here on the left-hand side of your screen. You click on the bottom icon, and then you grab an icon and you put it on the screen. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, Michelle, for that clarification. So I see a lot of people doing print ads, posters, it's popular. See some apps, YouTube. Some people have used movies. Okay, great. Good, and like we said, it's by no means inclusive. So hopefully by the end of the presentation today, when you leave, the list will be triple this long, because you'll have so many ways to use media literacy beyond just this little short list here. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. Always seems in the beginning of a presentation, we have so much time, and then by the end I'm like, oh no, I got to get to this and this. So we wanted to talk to you today about what does it mean to teach through and about media literacy. So this is one of the main learning goals that we're going to be discussing throughout our presentation. And what does it mean to teach about media literacy? Because when you're teaching through and when you're teaching about, it really allows you to, for your students and yourself, to gain a deeper understanding of media literacy. So I have an example here on the slide. I won't read it to you. You can just take a look about if you are using G Suite. So by that I mean the Google Apps for Education, and what it would mean to teach through and about. And the next slide, I think, might be a bit of a more concrete example, especially for our primary teachers in the room. So I'll give you a minute just to look at that. And again, if you had any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. Okay, so for this example, we all know what these are, and if you when I see these, I think, oh, this is a media literacy presentation. I'm not sure. This looks like math to me. Yes, it is math. So when we look at these, we know that these are linking cubes or snap cubes, and we often use them in math, but they can be used in other subjects as well. And you'll see that we have two different color cubes here. We have some black and white, and we have some color. So for example, if I was teaching, and this is a way for me to illustrate talking about teaching through and about, and if I was going to teach patterning, let's say for example, I want my students to understand that if they use yellow, green cubes, like 2 yellow, 2 green, 2 yellow, 2 green, that they're creating a simple A-B pattern. Now, if you look at the cubes on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that and it's the same picture, but it's just in grayscale. So with this example, I could easily give those cubes to my students and say, okay, now build a pattern, using color as a changing attribute, and they could use the very dark black ones there, and they could use, say, the row right beside it, which is kind of a gray. But it's harder for the students to differentiate between the colors in the pattern, because they're almost so similar, especially if they were using, let's say, so there's the black in the middle, the orange ones on the left, and the dark orange, and then the bright orange on the right. It's harder to differentiate between the pattern because the colors are so similar. So this is the same thing in media literacy. When we want to teach through and we want to teach about media literacy, we could just show a movie in class and say, okay, who's the characters? What was the story about? Yep, okay, so we watched a movie, and, now I've done some media literacy. I talked about maybe the author's message, right? I talked about the characters, but I didn't really get to talk about, how did, in the movie, when it got really scary, how did the music influence my feelings about that text? How did it change the feeling within the text? So, for example, that way, then I'm really teaching through and about. I didn't know at this point, Neil, if you wanted to jump in and add anything here before I go to the next slide.
I think you've made the point well. The about part of the media is that they chose primary colors so that didn't become an obstacle in understanding patterning. Did you hear that?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, good.
So as we go through the presentation today, I want you to think about that concept of teaching through and teaching about. And as I talk to you today about some more examples, you'll be able to see what that might look like. Neil, did you want to say anything about this piece here?
Well, this was the picture you took, Chelsea, so I don't know why you're asking me to talk about it, but I think it's a great example of found examples. So Chelsea was sitting on her GO train, and she looked up, and there was an opportunity for her to understand media and to use this. And so all she had to do was take her phone out, take a picture, and she had something she could talk to her class about. And this is an experience that we have quite often, where if you know what you're looking for, you have many, many opportunities that just appear in front of you. You don't have to look that hard for them. You just have to be ready to see them. And it's the same thing really with those manipulatives, right? They're always in your classroom. They always seem to be connected to math, but they can also be connected to media.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Neil. Yeah, so for example, with my students, I'm looking for opportunities for daily experiences with media. I don't want to think about it as an isolated, event that only happens during period 2 on this time. So I might ask my students after, we've discussed teaching through and about media literacy, and we've done some activities, what kind of things do you see in your world around you that interest you or you have questions about, and could you bring into the classroom? So for example, I saw this one on the GO train, and it says it's good etiquette to tweet about bad etiquette. So this is a poster on the GO train, and this one caught my attention because I was thinking about in primary, especially, we talk a lot about rules and responsibilities. We talk a lot about, behavior, setting the conditions for learning or classroom management. And I thought, this poster here really made me think. It's good etiquette to tweet about bad etiquette. So, on the GO train, we have the second level, which is the quiet zone, and that was developed because, GO train riders a few years ago felt that the GO train became too much of a noisy place, and there was no place if you just wanted to kind of sit and relax on your ride home, because people have their devices, they're talking really loudly on their cell phone next to you, and it's not becoming a calming ride. So they said, okay, we're gonna do the top zone as the quiet zone, and the bottom of the coaches are going to be for talking or using devices. And this got me thinking, if I bring this into my classroom and I talk to my students a little bit about, Go Train etiquette and why this poster is here, so they have that background knowledge, then, what does it mean by it's good etiquette to tweet about bad etiquette? Because we need to think about with our students, many of our students have their own devices. They bring them into the classrooms, and this is probably more so in the upper grades. But when is it okay to film something? When is it not okay? And then we can have discussions around the notion of, things like public shaming. That goes on a lot with social media. And, not to say that, and when we talk about media literacy, something I learned very much from Neil was that we don't want to talk about good and bad media. So this is an example of a bad poster. It's, what does this poster say? Or what does this messaging say to us, and how can we think critically about it, and how can we use our skills in media literacy to help inform our opinion? And I'll talk a little bit about some of those skills in media literacy through our key concepts.
This poster also gives us a chance to talk about snitching or telling on people, because it's actually inviting adults to tell on other adults, and that becomes a big issue in a school classroom, and you have to decide whether it's a good thing or not. Adults call it whistleblowing, and children call it snitching, and that's an opportunity to talk about values.
Mm-hmm. So when we think about using the key concepts in the media literacy classroom, I'll show you the key concepts on the next page, and there's quite a few of them, so don't become overwhelmed, and I don't want you to think that you have to use all the key concepts at the same time. And oftentimes I feel that when you find a really great media text, and I should say that I should preface the word media text by saying that I'm using this in a broad term beyond just the fact of a book is a text, that's a media text, a print ad is a media text, a YouTube video is a media text, but we can also think about our environments as a media text. So we can think about our classroom spaces, the hallways in which our students walk every day. We can discuss the way in which teachers dress when they come to school, or just the teacher at the front of the room, or the teacher in the room. That's a media text. So I want you to really think broadly about this notion of texts. And if you find a rich media text, like the one on the last page, it will lead to many areas for discussion and many teaching opportunities, and it may lead to more than one key concept. For more information, if you want to look back at some of the key concepts more closely and a bit of an explanation about them, please visit the Association for Media Literacy, aml.ca. You can, Michelle can send out that link, and you'll be able to find the key concepts. So here's the first 4 key concepts. And if, again, through the presentation, I'll be able to discuss examples of what these look like in the primary classroom. But if there's any here that you're not sure about, please feel free to put in the chat box and we could respond to you. So media constructs reality, media constructs versions of reality, audiences negotiate meaning, and media has economic implications, or media have economic implications. So again, if you had any questions about any of these, you can put them in the chat box. And I know you're thinking, okay, well, you might not be thinking this, but I know the first time I saw these, I was teaching grade 3 at the time, and I said, yeah, okay, grade 3s are going to get media have economic implications. I'm not sure about that, but hopefully throughout the presentation today, you'll be able to see how us as primary teachers can, have these in the have this knowledge and then work through very concrete examples so our students are able to understand a notion of this concept. And I may not use this language, with my students all the time, but it's good information for me to know. Media texts communicate value messages. Media texts communicate political and social messages. Form and content are closely related in each medium, and each medium has a unique aesthetic form. So again, if you had any questions about any of these, feel free to put them in the chat box, and we can, as we're chatting, address what these might look like. If you've, you're already familiar with these key concepts and you've used any of them in an activity or a lesson, I know the chat box is kind of small, but you can still, put an experience in there, and we could talk to that piece as well. I know we can't see each other, but we can make this as interactive as possible. And we'll talk a little bit about how Neil and I prepped for this presentation knowing that it was a webinar, which really changes the type of experience, and it allowed us to mediate the experience in a different way. So as we prepped the presentation, we thought about it in a different way than we would a face-to-face presentation.
Andrea has asked, how would you differentiate between key concept number 1 and key concept number 2?
Media constructs reality and media constructs versions of reality. Well, that's a great question, Andrea, because that's our next slide. So we're going to show you. Do you want to just talk to the example, Neil, and then if she still is not sure, we'll keep going?
I think go to the slide, and if that explains it, we're done.
Yeah, perfect. So here's our first one. Neil, did you want to talk about the first key concept and Minecraft?
It's impossible for any medium to reproduce reality completely because as you sit where you are surrounded 360 degrees and everybody is moving naturally. You see everything in very, very high definition. Minecraft is a great example of constructing a subset of reality because people have square heads and arms, and squares are kind of the key feature in Minecraft. So they've decided to represent reality, but not accurately, and they've decided to give in to that rather than try to fight against it. And so that's concept number 1, where it's impossible to show precise reality, so we have to have a subset of reality, and there have to be some things lost. In the case of Minecraft, what is lost are curves, and in the case of other things, of course, there are other things lost. If it's a podcast, then the visual is lost, the photograph and motion is lost, and so each medium loses some part of reality. It constructs a portion of the reality, but it cannot construct all of it. That being said, brings us to number 2, where it becomes a version and it has biases. So in the case of Minecraft, we can still have color, but we haven't got curves. And so the biases are that we are still managing to communicate color, which is part of our real experience, but not curves, which is still part of our real experience, and it's not communicating that.
Okay, perfect. So with this example, media constructs a version of reality. In a moment, I'll ask Michel to put the link there, and he just did. Perfect. So you can take a look at that in just a minute. I'll just do a little focused viewing with you before we begin, and that's something you can talk to your students about. So, the first time you might show your students a video, and, in media literacy, we often, I love to use students' experiences in my space because I feel that, first of all, it connects to them. And as you know, the kindergarten program is very much an inquiry-based program. So if my students, come in and talk to me about something that they're watching on the computer at home or on a tablet or a device, I might go, oh, this is kind of interesting. Like, talk to me about this, and I might Google it, and then I might, you know, see what it is. So something that happened in my classroom was that my students were interested in toy videos, so they like to watch kid YouTubers play with toys. And then, you know, they watch these videos of the kids playing with toys, and then, you know, hopefully if the video was influential enough, they'll ask their parents for the toy. So I thought, okay, this is good. And my son is also 3, and he likes to watch these as well, not quite as expensive as some of the YouTubers that my students watch in the classroom because they're in kindergarten, but he likes to watch little videos of kids playing with Play-Doh and little Paw Patrol toys. And I said, well, you know, James, that's my son's name, you have Play-Doh, so, you know, you could, nope, I want to watch the video of someone playing with Play-Doh. So I find this an interesting concept and idea, because this is definitely not an experience I had. So media, back to our key concept, media constructs versions of reality. So as you watch this, you might notice that the toys, it'd be interesting. I've never played with these toys in this video. They look extremely awesome and fun, and you don't have to watch the whole video. We'll just watch sort of the first 20 to 30 seconds because you'll be able to get a gist of what it is. You'll notice that the toys in these videos always work really well. Objects may appear larger than they actually are in real life. So, you know, it's interesting to think about, you know, much like, I guess, a toy commercial. When you watch a toy being played with on a screen, is it actually how it works in real life, right? Is it as big as it is? Is it as small as it is? And how are the people who are interacting with the toy, so the people advertising the toy, constructing that version of reality, right? So that's something to think about. So I'll let Michelle put the link right there. It's under Shot Bubble Ball, and I'll have you watch it for just about 30 seconds. So I'll pause my mic, and you can watch the video, and then we'll go on.
You just cut and paste the link in your browser, and then it should be able to work. And then you return to Blackboard in about 30 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just resume so you kind of get the idea. I know it's very loud video, but it looks really fun. So I mentioned just briefly a little bit about the focus viewing activity. So when I showed one of the YouTube videos to my class, and I just did this actually just before the break, and I'm planning on continuing this week, it was a kid YouTuber. And, you know, he does toy reviews. So he gets paid by the toy companies to, you know, play with the toys on the YouTube videos, post the videos, and, you know, he makes a lot of money off of that. And the first time I showed the video to my students, it was mayhem. Like, they were like, this is wild. Like, they were just in shock that I don't know if it was the fact that the teacher, I mean, they're kindergarten, so they're 4 and 5, the teacher's allowing us to watch this. It was crazy. And there was no way I was going to get any kind of critical discussion out of that, you know, craziness. But if I keep going back, like I'm going to go this week, back to the video again, you know, I might ask a question first, and I might watch the video after 2 or 3 times with sound, without sound, and that's often helpful because it eliminates other types of distractions for them, and then they might be able to focus on something I'm asking them to look at, maybe the color, maybe a particular camera angle, maybe how the characters in the video are looking. I could also, you know, I'm just using a smartboard to project it, so I could also turn off or cover up the projector and just play it so they can just hear it. So those are really helpful strategies in getting your students to do a focused viewing activity if you want them to look at one particular aspect of a video or a particular clip within a movie that helps eliminate those other distractions so you can get at maybe a key concept or you know, pull out some interesting ideas. And then in the next slide here, there's a link which Michelle can put in the box there. You don't have to look at it now. You can just look at it later. But it's about, you know, again, going back to that idea of media constructs versions of reality. It's just an article from, I can't remember where it's from. Anyways, Bloomberg, like a business magazine. And it talks about how much kids make, you know, when they get paid to do these YouTube videos. And it's interesting because that's something you could talk to your students about. I mean, the children in this particular article that were profiled actually are homeschooled. They don't go to school. They do filming for about, I think it's like, I want to say 5 to 6 hours a day. So it's a large chunk of their time. That's why they can't be in school. And the whole time, you know, they're throwing up these YouTube videos, so they're making money. But you know, what's the other side to that? And there's not that there's anything wrong, because again, we don't want to think of good media, bad media, because this is a job that, and actually Neil mentioned this to me when we were prepping for the presentation. He said, you know, this is something your students might do when they grow up. You know, they become a professional YouTuber, which is actually a very legit profession. You know, I don't know if YouTube will be around in, you know, 20 years, you know, or maybe they'll become the 11 and they'll have, but then we also want to think about with our students, as, you know, often as it is, you know, what are the privacy concerns around that, and, you know, how can we be safe when we use this technology if we're choosing to use YouTube, which is obviously a very public platform. So there's always that discussion as well that happens, but this is an example of, you know, using that key concept, media constructs versions of reality. I could also use the same video and think about the key concept of, you know, media has economic implications. So you can see now how one example started with my students' own interests have now led to 2 particular key concepts. And depending on what I want my students to get out of it, you know, I might ask them particular questions to help them. In this case, with my students, this example, I'm more looking at constructing the versions of reality, but I haven't gone through the entire discussion with them, so they might have other interesting ideas and questions that they would raise, and I would, you know, respond back to those questions. So although I have a big idea of where I want my lesson to go, you know, it might go in a bit of a different direction based on, you know, the feedback my students are giving me. I don't know if Neil wanted to add anything with that piece. Are you okay?
We'll talk about it when we get to values.
Okay, perfect. So, so the next key concept is media has economic implications. So you can see that these ads here, and yeah, perfect. Thank you, Michelle, for posting the link there. So again, you don't have to visit the link now, but if you do visit the link, you'll get this, and you'll get this ad at the link there. I'm going to go back. So you'll get these 2 plus a few more. Some of the ads you'll see here are safe for school. Others, you know, the language might not be appropriate for our primary students, but in an older classroom, you know, you could have that discussion, but that would be up to your judgment. So these are actually real ads printed by the City of Toronto. And again, my key concept here I'm looking at is economic implications, but there's other key concepts that I think it could relate to as well. And these ads were all printed, ready to go. They had actually been posted up, and I think it was maybe 4 years ago, about now. And the ads got pulled. And they were for littering, because you can see it has the City of Toronto, the Live Green logo on the bottom, and it says littering says a lot about you. And there was this ad and then this one here. And I mean, you could probably understand why it was pulled, because the people of Lay's chips and Crazy Glue, you can see that's how they made the word lazy in this ad, did not like the fact that their product was being portrayed in such a negative light. And the City of Toronto did not ask Lay's Chips or Crazy Glue to use their products in this way. So that caused some problems. And the link that Michelle posted there from the Huffington Post talks a little bit about the background on of these ads and a little bit about the story. And then that's, you know, when I did this, and I used these two ads here, and there's another one I used in the next slide deck, with my grade 3 class. And, or sorry, I'm not saying grade 3. Sorry, I mean grade 1 class last year. And we were doing this probably in about February, about March, April, yeah, around that time. And I used it to think about the, or to touch on the reading skill for inferring. Because I thought, wow, you know, these ads work really well for inferring rather than reading, you know, a traditional text that you might use for inferring, which we had already done. And at the time, my students were also, it was part of a larger project, and they were also doing an inquiry around reducing our waste within the school. So, and I'll talk a little bit about what that project looked like in more detail, but this was sort of a starting point for them. So I would show them this ad, and I would say, okay, you know, like I just throw it up on a projector, but you don't have to have a projector. You can just, you know, print it and throw it up on a chart paper. You know, I think with ads, the coloring is an important part of the media text, so you want to make sure that hopefully you're getting some color. And, you know, I would say, you know, what do you see? What does it say about you? And this one where it says lazy that you see up on your screen now, this is the first one that we started with. And, you know, my students talked to me a little bit about the word, about the words in the bottom right corner, and then they started looking more closely at it, and they said, oh, you know what, I think it looks like the ground, and, you know, I see part of a shoe. And I said, oh, yeah, that's interesting. And you'll see in the next couple of slides, I'll talk a little bit about taking photos with my students, and when we talk about basic camera angles, and they're very basic, because again, I'm talking about my younger students here. Not that you can get more advanced, but I just think of, you know, what is most applicable and helpful for them. And so they already knew about the type of camera angle that was shown here. And then we had a discussion about the messaging. So, you know, like, okay, so what, you know, this is what you see. Now, what kind of text do you think this might be, and what's the author's message? And we went through and we brainstormed, and then, you know, we wrote it up into sort of, well, not sort of, into a nice paragraph, a nice response as a whole class. So in addition here, I'm also doing my gradual release of responsibility model with my students. So I didn't just say, go give me a response. I wanted to talk about all these ideas. And this is probably about almost a week, so 4 days to kind of, you know, go through this and really get at all the pieces I wanted to get at. And then here's another ad that we looked at as well. So this was sort of the second one that we did as practice together. And again, they were familiar. They all knew goldfish, but they had problems identifying the other product. Not that it's, you know, needed, but that does help. And I also Googled images for them just so they could see from the previous one, like, again, they knew chips. They knew they were chips, but they didn't know that that was crazy glue. Some of them had a hard time figuring out what it is. They thought it was a juice box, like, you know, the squeeze ones that you get. So anyway, so I Googled those images for them just so they could see. But I would say that the messaging in terms of, you know, you're selfish if you litter, you're lazy if you litter, they did understand that idea. And we talked a lot about, you know, and a lot of them question that, like, just because I litter doesn't mean I'm a selfish person. Like, what's wrong with that? Like, maybe there wasn't a garbage can. I was like, well, I don't know. That's a good point. Do you put it in your pocket and you wait, right? So then we got into a bit of like a ethical and moral discussion happening there around littering, which I think is great, because I think that shows that the text isn't just a surface level text. It allows for deep, richer discussions. And I'm going to ask Neil here if I forgot anything before I move on.
No, that's great. I'm thinking a lot about some of the later key concepts, and I hate to be jumping ahead, but when I look at this one, Chelsea, I notice, for instance, a great expanse. Like the two packages don't take up very much space. They take up at the most 20% of that. And so I would ask the students, why wouldn't they get closer so I could see that? Why wouldn't they try to make that point for these packages? And the answer is that the ground itself is an important part of the image, right? It's as important as the packaging, because I need to be able to see that the packaging has been thrown onto the ground and helps to communicate the message.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that's when we want to think about the composition of a particular text. And we could actually use that word with our students' composition, right? Because the person who made the text made a very deliberate decision to place the garbage in a certain way, to make the word and place it on the ground, because the whole idea is about littering. And again, the economic implications here is that, you know, the ads actually ended up you know, being pulled because they got, the people behind the products got quite upset about how their products were being shown. And my students actually, like, I'm not really sure if they get that concept. I thought, is this too out there for them? But they actually did. They said, oh yeah, it makes it look really bad. And a lot of them actually did understand that concept. So I was quite pleased about that. So just some curriculum connections here. You know, media literacy is great because I think it links to many areas of our curriculum. I know it's located in language, and it has a strand within language. And, you know, with our kindergarten friends here, there is, you know, one overall expectation for them, you know, under the demonstrating math and literacy behaviors, where it talks about looking at a variety of media texts. And hopefully I've given you some ideas already beyond just what we might think of traditional media texts. But these two articles here, and Michelle has put them in the chat box for you here, might be helpful in thinking about how to integrate a variety of curriculum strands into a unit, and the notion of thinking about critical literacy as well. So I'll leave those two there for you. Again, this is for you to go back on. But the first Building Capacity series there on integrating literacy in the classroom, a lot of, I found this article quite helpful, and it's kind of older now, but I found it helpful just in thinking about how do we build integrated units of studies, because as teachers we have so much to cover, and you know, we can't cover everything possibly in the curriculum, but we want to hit on those big ideas and overall expectations. So this is a great way to think about, you know, how can I integrate, you know, math, reading, writing, science, social studies, all of those strands into one great encompassing unit. So just, you know, bringing my students through that gradual release model in this little unit we did on environmental stewardship. And I should say that you know, I also chose these ads because they related to, we were doing science at the time, and it related really well to our science strand. And as well, you know, in the new science curriculum, I say new, but it's been out for a couple of years now, for the 1 to 8, they do talk a lot about environmental sustainability, right? And a great definition I heard about sustainability is enough for all forever. I thought that was really good. So, so I thought that, you know, these ads really related well to that big idea within the curriculum that students need to think about. So this ad was the final one that I gave them, and this one they had to do on their own. So using that gradual release model, these are some of the questions I asked them when they saw the ad. So they'd done the previous, this one and this one, guided and as a whole group, and this is the one they had to do on their own for a response. And, you know, they wrote it out. I mean, some of them, you know, you can make accommodations, describe, etc. But this is the ad that was given. You know, and I said, what do you think is the creator's message in the text? Why do you think this text was made? And where might the poster be displayed? So these are some guiding questions to help get them going. And I think this is, and I chose this particular text because a lot of my students live in apartments, and I thought that this text would really connect well with them because they have that background knowledge of, you know, like a garbage chute. Yeah, and I thought it would that they would also be able to understand it as well. And I thought it was interesting, and I actually thought it was pretty good. So. And again, those the image source is listed there as well, and Michelle put the link in before. So then after we had done an initial investigation on sort of thinking about environmental sustainability, we get to the fun media stuff. The other stuff is fun too, but this is the stuff that really excites me when my students get to create and move to that production stage. So we can look at the text, we can think about the audience, but then we also want to think about, you know, producing it. And I should say in media literacy, we don't, just because we're looking at a deconstruction of a text or we're talking in detail about a text, we don't always have to move to that, that production phase. Sometimes it's okay to just have that discussion about the text and, you know, about how might the audience respond or who is this text for, but I also love that production. So my students had to redesign a snack food package, and the reason that they had to do that was because they did an investigation within our school about waste, because we were having a problem at the time of a lot of waste going in the wrong spot. So people putting paper into the garbage can, people putting tinfoil into the green bin, and part of the reason we have those three types of receptacles in our school, garbage, green bin, and blue box, is because we have a morning meal program. And we're given food to hand out to the kids. And some of the food is in packaging that is completely recyclable or reusable, and some of it isn't. So we looked at some types of packaging that was troubling for our students and how could we reduce it. So that was how we, you know, came up with that inquiry question. And I think it's really powerful, again, like I said, when you use students' own experiences in the classroom, because it connects to them and it makes it very real and concrete for them, rather than this thing that we're just talking about that they don't really get. And I think that's so important for primary students, because if they don't see the relevance to them, the engagement level, I don't feel is there. You might see the relevance for you as a teacher, but the students have to connect with it too. So you can see an example here, and we tried to zoom in on this for you. An example of deconstructing the snack food packages. So we looked at a Nutri-Grain and a fruit roll-up package, and you know, and I just had my students bring snack food packages in from home. So that's where I got the fruit roll-up box from, which is great because then I'm also seeing, you know, what kind of snacks are my students eating at home. It's reflective of them. And then when we have these critical discussions about the parts of the package, you know, what are the codes and conventions of the package, they might go home and then start seeing the media text around them with those eyes, which is great. They probably might even talk to their parents about it, teach their parents something that their parents didn't know. So, and when I say codes and conventions, we looked at one of the key concepts. The last one there was, you know, each medium has a unique aesthetic form. So we know that when we look at a kid's, a cereal, I should say a cereal marketed or a snack food marketed for children and a snack food marketed for adults, like Nutri-Grain bars. I'm thinking of the Kellogg's ones that you can buy, the Special K Nutri-Grain bars that are kind of like healthy. I think some of them are even marketed towards women, you know, more so than men, or I at least get that feeling from the commercials on TV. You know, and a snack or a cereal bar that's marketed towards kids, the packaging is going to look very different. You know, they might do label slapping, so same product, but they put Paw Patrol on, so automatically, you know, kids want to buy it. So that's when we talk about the codes and conventions. So how do we know when we look at this particular text that this text is a poster versus a newspaper? Or why is this a magazine cover versus a newspaper cover? Like, what makes that text unique from other texts? So we talked about some of those features of a snack food package, because if they're going to design their own, they have to know, what am I going to put on my snack food package? So we really broke it down for them. And the recycling poster is there because our snack food package had to be the one that they're ultimately going to design had to be made out of completely recyclable material. So we're again eliminating that waste. So very simply, I just took the box, flattened it, put it up on chart paper, put some sticky notes. We had a discussion, and this was like a 2-day discussion, you know, if I'm thinking about time-wise for my students. and they all agreed that the package had to stand out, have bright colors. And then Michelle will put the link in for you here, but this is about planning for our snack food package. So they had to do a redesign of an existing snack food package. And in the bottom of the image here, you'll see the, what is that, sorry, the applesauce containers, the Nutri-Grain, and the Rice Krispie Mini snacks. So those were the 3 types of snack foods as part of our snack program that produced the most waste. Partly because the foil on top of the applesauce can't be recycled. The Nutri-Grain bar, the type of packaging it's wrapped in, is not recyclable, has to be thrown in the garbage. And the Crispy Minis, although many of that packaging was recyclable, it's like packaging on top of packaging. So part of that is for safety, but another piece, we thought that it still causes a lot of waste. And we knew that because we have a school eco club, and part of their job is to audit the waste in the school. And we actually brought them into our classroom and interviewed them as part of our experts to help us with this. So if you look in the Google Doc there, it's a link to the planning sheet that we use to design our snack food package, so you can get a copy and do this in your classroom. So if you have, not sure what you want to teach tomorrow, here's your new unit. Ready to go. And here's our inquiry questions that we asked our green team. We can just see a few of those. So again, you can see how using media literacy now is relating to many areas of the curriculum. So some initial questions they generated. And then from that discussion, we realized, the type of waste and how we're going to reduce our waste. Now, in prepping for the presentation today, something that I didn't get to talk to my students about that I wish I had, and this is why working with other educators is so valuable, because you get so many ideas when you work with colleagues opposed to, planning on your own, is, Neil had suggested about, what are better ways to recycle and how do different packaging promote recycling. So Neil, you found these, or you were thinking about these images here on the plastic water bottle, like the disposable one, versus the, the Camelback water bottle here, that's a brand name, that, is actually truly very, very recyclable because you can use it again and again.
It's also the difference between recyclable and reusable.
So that's something, definitely you could talk to your students about in terms of looking at different types of packaging. Did I miss anything there, Neil?
No, that's good, and it helps us to have a discussion about global stewardship too.
So again, you can see through this lesson, I'm able to teach about media literacy because I'm teaching, about the particular City of Toronto ads. I'm teaching, about snack food packaging, but I'm also teaching through because my students ultimately were able to design their own snack food packaging, and this is what they came up with. And their packaging had to be completely recyclable materials. So we used the little recycling posters you saw on the previous slide there to look at different materials, and they just brought these found materials in from home. I just asked that the materials were cleaned out, so don't bring me the yogurt container that has the bit of yogurt left over from your snack last night. It, has to be washed out, and their package actually had to hold the physical food. So the first one there, I think, held the applesauce. The second was the rice cake, and the third, I think, was the Nutri-Grain bar. So, and then their package had to include, we did a co-created success criteria for this, had to include and I'll show you on the next page here. Oh, sorry, don't have it there. Had to include like some bright colors, the name of the product, but the product, and it had to be, again, all recyclable material. And then what I did is they actually did a class presentation for this. So their final, they took about half a day to build their actual packaging, and then they did a presentation for the whole class. And the reason I had my kids do a presentation and not just mark what I saw in front of me was because then my students are able to articulate their thinking. And with grade 1, you know, process first product, maybe not grade 1, I would say many grades. You know, this looks like, oh, it's just some couple things slapped together, but this was very thoughtful and intentional on their part, and they give me a lot more detail when they do an oral presentation. And I photographed it, and I sent it home to their parents, although I couldn't maybe send home the package because it didn't quite survive the rest of the week because it was held together with tape or glue stick glue, that then their parents could get a copy of the success criteria and the rubric, the final mark, and some comments and feedback for suggestions. And, you know, and then I'm doing oral communication as well because my students are now presenting their product, which is another strand we have to cover. And I think for kinders, you know, we spend a lot of time developing their oral language skills, so this is still definitely a very valuable piece to talk about. Neil, did I miss anything with that project, or?
That's great, Chelsea.
Okay. Okay. When Neil and I planned the presentation, we wanted to have a little bit of a back and forth, so that's why I'm referring, just so you know as an audience, that's why I'm referring to him just in case you want to jump in and add anything. So our next key concept is media texts communicate value messages. And I love this key concept, and I love this project that I'm going to talk about. And I have to thank very much Neil and Sylvie Webb, who actually took the media AQ with both of these, you know, teachers way back, and they really, you know, both opened my eyes to, you know, what media literacy could be beyond just you know, media text. I think I took media literacy because I liked using technology, and I was like, oh yeah, then someone suggested that I tried the media AQ because it relates well to technology, and I was like, oh perfect, so I'm going to learn how to better make use of apps. But it was, you know, much broader than that. And part of what we did in our media course on the first or second class was we had a media walk. So we met in downtown Toronto, we met in St. Lawrence Market, and we worked our way through Toronto because our course at that time was based in Toronto. And, you know, we moved through the different neighborhoods, and if you're familiar with Toronto, you know Toronto is a city of neighborhoods. That's often how it's described. And we looked at, you know, how did we feel as we moved through these environments? How did I feel in St. Lawrence Market at first? How do I feel, you know, in Chinatown? You know, if I go into a church, how am I feeling at the time? Neil, what was the protest that was going on at the time? Can't remember. Occupy?
Yes, we went to the Occupy movement.
Yeah, so we went there as well because that was happening. And yeah, we just kind of reflected on our experience, you know, moving through the different neighborhoods and the different communities within Toronto. So you can, you know, use your environment as a media text with your students, and then you can think about, you know, what are the value messages, you know, portrayed, you know, in our environment. So for example, when I would do a walk with my students in our own neighborhood, and I've done this many years, I've been at my school for 9 years, or 8 years, sorry. And when I began teaching media literacy on rotation, that was one of the first lessons I planned with the grade 3 class is, you know, we went on a walk and we talked about, you know, how does the space in our community, you know, portray a particular value message. So something that, and I've done a few walks since with them, and, you know, something that we've talked about, and maybe probably more with older students, but, you know, we do talk about the younger students, is the amount of police surveillance within our community. If you walk to the main intersection, there's a big sign from the Toronto Police that talks about, you know, this section is monitored by the Toronto Police, and you know, anyways, and we talk about that sign and what does it mean, and why is the camera here? Why is it not at the other end of the main intersection? Why is it at this particular intersection? And, you know, and what kind of value message does that create? We also noticed in our community that many of the benches and places for seating along the main road were donated by the local BIA, so business improvement area. And, you know, my students noticed that and had some questions about, you know, what is a BIA and what do they do, right? And why is that bench donated by them? So just an example of some different ideas you could do. And this year we did the walk with my kindergarten and our grade 4 and 5 learning buddies, or reading buddies. And, you know, this is a picture that, you know, one of my students took on the walk. Our school was near the newly built Up Express, which caused a lot of upheaval and construction in our community over the last sort of 5-6 years in building it. And I loved this photograph, but something that I love doing community walks is because here's some just other photos that they took. And I had sorry, I'll go back to what I love doing community walks is, you know, I get to see the community through my students' eyes. I don't live in the community where my students teach, and I do work in a very challenging neighborhood in the city of Toronto. You might call it a priority neighborhood. There's a lot of, you know, social and economic needs, but I don't want my students to feel that their community isn't valued, and I want them to very much feel proud of their community and very proud where they came from. And we love doing community walks because I get to see, like I said, the community through my students' eyes, and my students get to say, you know, there's Popeyes, that's my favorite place to go, and I got to go there on my birthday for lunch, and you know, they get to talk to me about their experience, or, you know, that's the store that I go to with my parents, that's what we call the African store. I don't know what it's called, the African store. That's not what it says on the sign, but within the community, that's what it's referred to. So yeah, I think it's a really, especially if you don't, or even if you do live in the community where you teach, you know, that's the place where your students walk every day. That's their home. So why not have a discussion about their home and the kinds of experiences that they have? And you could just, you know, you don't need a lot of technology. I mean, my students had an iPad that they shared with their buddy, but you could just have a few cameras. You could record sound, you could record images, you could do short little video, and you could come back and have a discussion about, you know, what do they see, sort the pictures, and, you know, have a discussion about thinking about their environment as a media text. And it's interesting because I've done the walk for a couple of years now, and each time I do it with a different class, we kind of have a different discussion about what we see because it's a different group of students. So, and it's been fun for me to see how the community has changed. Like I said, we had the Up Express built a few years ago, so that really changed the layout of our community, and it's interesting to think about how the walk looked before and how that walk looks now. And I had a hard time pulling the pictures to put in the presentation because I didn't want to, you know, that my students took, because I didn't almost want to be selective of their pictures because I think all of them had really fantastic photos, but these are just a few that I thought that I could speak to. And then this year with our walk, part of our big question that we're looking at is, you know, what is something beautiful that we see in our community, and what story can we tell about our community based on, you know, the images that we find and the discussions that we're having. So that's where our inquiry question right now with our community is going. And I think in terms of our kindergarten friends in the room, that relates really well because we've had really, really rich discussions about the 4 frames with belonging and contributing, which I think is sometimes a tough one when we think about assessing, but I know I have, you know, quite a bit of anecdotal and pedagogical documentation on that piece because we've done our community walk. Neil, did you want to mention anything about the community walk piece that maybe I forgot, or the media environment that I forgot?
And I just jumping in for a quick second, sorry about that. Just to mention that Shazadi had asked a couple of questions. She wanted to know what grade this is for, etc. If you can just address them in the chat box, that would be great. Thanks. Okay,
maybe Chelsea can answer those while I'm talking about this. The community walk is a super idea for a couple of reasons. First of all, it acknowledges that media exist outside school, And so it helps the students see media outside the classroom. It's not just a classroom academic experience. Second of all, it helps them to appreciate their community and to understand that it's kind of a system and it's working together. The sign, the fire truck and other things are there. It gives them a chance to take those photographs and talk about their experiences. And so it has several benefits, and it's really a very, very inexpensive resource because it's something you can do, again, just a few blocks away from your school. You don't have to arrange a lot of busing and a lot of supervision. You can take the students out for a short or long time. In the case of Chelsea's kinders, of course, it's not a long walk because their attention span and their capabilities aren't going to be able to do a long walk. So it has great opportunities and benefits, and it can be scaled up and it can be scaled down. And not only could that same notion be applied to the local community, but if you take your students to an excursion of some kind, they can take cameras and microphones and they can record their experiences there. So that will extend the learning, but also help them to see. So if they went into a museum or they went to a science center or they went to a theater, they could see how media are being used in those spaces and how those spaces are themselves media environments that are influencing the way that we think and the way that we learn. I was saving a comment too about the values messages because when we watched the student toy reviews, they mentioned very briefly but still distinctly that the company had provided all the toys. So there's a situation where they're doing a toy review on toys that have been given to them. And I would ask students of any age, and certainly kinders on up, if somebody were giving you free toys, how might that influence your judging the toys? Would the toys always be fun? Would you feel comfortable if you were saying that the toys weren't worth it or weren't much fun or were poorly constructed? Or would you kind of keep that to yourself because the next time you might not get another box of free toys sent to you? And that's a question that they need to hear because one of the things we're trying to do in media literacy is to help our students be skeptical. Not cynical, but skeptical. We want them to question things. We want them to do due diligence and critical thinking. And if they find everything is terrific, then great. If they find something is suspect, that's important too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Neil, for that that clarification. So just going back to media texts communicate value messages. I've used a few examples here where I've talked about taking photographs with my students, where my students take the photographs, or we're looking at photographs within a particular media text. So it's valuable to think about how do my students actually take a good photo, and what does a good photo look like? And a good photo is very subjective. But for example, my students do a lot, and this was the same last year, grade 1s or even grade 2s, and now especially in kindergarten, where they document some of their own learning. So if they make a beautiful pattern using like say those snap cubes, and they want to take a photo of it in an app, Pic Collage, or another app that uses photos, they don't stand on the other side of the room and take their photo. They have to be able to take a good photo. So we talk a lot about high angle camera shots, and these might be some things that you want to talk to your students about. And these can actually be used too if you're doing, like I said, a focus viewing activity, like Neil mentioned about the he was talking about the toy ad. You might want to think about, why did they use a close-up shot to portray, this toy versus why didn't they take the photograph from far away, right? Why did they do it close up? And these are all, when I used to teach media literacy on rotation for a couple of years, when we would talk about camera angles, and we would do that a lot when we'd be thinking about production, you know, and making our own little short videos or looking at a particular video, part of their homework would be to, you know, here's a few camera angles or shots that you want to look at, and, you know, go home and watch your favorite show and think about the type of, you know, where the camera is positioned and why that might be, and we'll chat about that the next day. And they thought that was the coolest assignment ever, to go home and watch TV, because they could tell their parents, I'm watching TV for my media literacy homework. So that was a very high return rate on that particular assignment. And again, using my students' interests. I think in the interest of time, I'm just looking ahead. Actually, no, I think, you know what, we have time. Michelle, if you want to just copy and paste that link in there, thanks. I'll let you guys just quickly view this. This is, so I talked a little about the community walk project, and this is an example that my students did in grade 3 when I taught media literacy on rotation. And I got permission to post this to the Association for Media Literacy YouTube site. So I'll give you a minute just to watch the video, and you can see a product of their walk, and this is a grade 3 class. So Michelle says you can just cut and paste the link into your browser. Okay, so if you had a chance to view the video, you can see it's pretty short, it's not very long. And you'll notice that the video is divided up sort of into 3 different sections: services, land use, I can't remember the other subheading there. And that was very intentional because I actually planned this unit. Like I said, I was teaching media literacy on rotation, and I co-planned it with the homeroom teacher who had to deliver the social studies portion. And we thought that this related really well to that. And then they went on the community walk and they created what I called a digital journal. You know, the homeroom teacher and I co-assessed it, co-marked it. And this project took a while, like, you know, when you're seeing this. And this is, you know, at the time I had gotten, you know, 6 iPads to use. Our school hadn't, you know, hadn't purchased a whole bunch of iPads yet, so, or tablets yet. So, you know, the access, the kids were in, you know, groups of at least 4. But it worked really well, and it was, you know, we started this probably in like end of October, and most of them finished up by mid-December, you know, and at that point I was seeing my classes twice a week. So if you are somebody who's doing media on rotation, or you're in a library position, you know, where you're not seeing your kids every day like a homeroom teacher, don't be afraid if sometimes projects seem to take a while, because, you know, you can only do so much in your time. But at the same time, you want to think about, you know, do I always have to move to production? Is it really worth it? Because sometimes if you spend too long in the production aspect, you lose your kids in the process. But, you know, and we use iMovie for this particular project, and, you know, iMovie I find is pretty good for grade 2, 3, 4, and up. I didn't use it a lot when I taught grade 1 because I found it a little challenging, but you know, if you really work at it, I think your kids could do it. But when I taught grade 1, I didn't feel like I did a lot of video production with them. But that's just, you know, maybe that year with my students, right? It might be different. And I've never used iMovie with kinders. So, yeah, and then just moving along here for our key concept, media texts communicate political and social messages. You'll see this is an example of a provocation that I've set up for my students, and to the, you know, kinder non-kinder teachers in the room. This might get a little kindergarten-ish language here, but I'll try my best to not get too jargony with you guys. So a provocation or an invitation for learning. So at the time, my students were really interested in money and shopping and going to stores. And that just came out of that was a response from my ECE and I to our dramatic play that was happening in the classroom. So at Block Center, they were always like building a store, and we thought, oh, okay. And they were asking me like, can we have the play money, Miss Atwell? And so we thought, well, let's have a little discussion about, not little, a big discussion about money and what are the symbols on money. Because for students to be able to, in kindergarten, it's great if they know that, 5 cents is the number 5, but we can also look at recognition of coins and just to understand that this physical object represents something. So you could do some fun things with your students here, which I did. We looked at bills from a while back versus bills now. How have they changed? What's different? What's the same? We did a lot of comparing, contrasting. So there's an example. You could, just throw this up on the smartboard and have a discussion about, this was a bill from like when I was a kid. And this is a bill now, what do you notice the same? The colors similar, the numbers the same, but the people are different. I see some French words, I see some English words. And you can have a discussion about symbolism because we know money is very, very highly political. We spend a lot of time discussing that with our students. So we looked at, for example, a toonie, and my students said, why is there a polar bear? I said, well, it's the symbol of Canada. Why is it? I never seen a polar bear here in Toronto, except at the zoo. Like, why does that represent a symbol of Canada? So, and then, something I ask my students to do is bring in their money from home. So if they couldn't physically bring it in, then maybe they could even, with their parents' help, email me, because I give parents my email me a picture of the money. And that's great because then I got to find out, and I did this, I guess, lesson in end of October, November. So at that point, I knew most of my students, but I didn't, necessarily know a lot about them. So it gave me an opportunity to get to know my students a little better. If they had money from a particular place, why did they have that money? Was it from a trip that they went on? Was it because they used to live there? And the stories that came out of that were just like awesome. I got to hear all about their trip to Jamaica, or that they went there, or their mom used to live there and now she lives here. And again, when we think about our, belonging and contributing frame within kindergarten, that's a great example of a way to think about connections to that frame. And, with this, you could look at, and we looked at too, like, how is the money from their country different than the money from our country? And, what are the similarities and differences? Neil, did you want to mention anything about this? Because I know we talked a little bit about this lesson in prepping.
The $10 bill is a really interesting change because this particular collection of images is not only just new in the last several months, but it includes a woman, and so other than a queen. So it's signaling a shift, so that rather than always having male Canadian heroes, we're allowing ourselves to have female Canadian heroes, and I think that's both important to occur and important for us to discuss with our students, and maybe even have them do some research as to who else might be appropriate to appear on a dollar bill. You mentioned the polar bear, and so that little piece over there of the Trinidad and Tobago bill is showing the scarlet ibis, which is a very important animal in Trinidad and Tobago. The way that the polar bear is an important one here. I don't know that they see the scarlet ibis more than we see the polar bear, but it certainly is important to them. And then, of course, it looks like we put heroes on, right? The image of the Jamaican there is assumed to be a hero. It'd be interesting to have an inquiry to look at various bills and say who's on them and why are they there.
Just turn your mic off because there was a little bit of, okay, thanks.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Neil. Like Neil was talking about, quote, heroes that are on different money, and if, what does that whole concept or notion mean? I found with my students, with the kinders, they had the people were a little bit hard for them to connect to. They connected better to the animals. The people, it was a little bit abstract. I tried to talk to them a little bit about, the like Wilfrid Laurier or the people on the money, but they had a bit of a hard time understanding that. But they were just like more interested in the animal. But I think that's just naturally that age group. But with an older group, that might be something definitely interesting to discuss with them. Neil, did you want to mention anything before I go to the next one about emojis?
Nope, this is great.
Okay, thanks. So, and again, part of my students, so what we just continue to extend that learning in kindergarten by them making their own money. So, so there is an example of a student, making their own money, and we put flyers in the classroom as well for them to look at, partly because they said that they wanted flyers because they saw them in the store, but then also my students ended up using the flyers as a reference point to look at how to print and make the different numbers. So for example, a student made a $10 bill because she saw something that she wanted to buy that was like $9, and she knew that if she had 10, then she'd have enough money to buy the item in the picture. So that's a nice math coming out of that, because we have to do a little counting and talk about looking at our number line. So there's lots of other learning that's happening here. And we know as kindergarten teachers that we're looking for multiple opportunities within learning, and that we want to notice and name the learning for our students. So here's an example of, my mistake. And we want to, notice and name the learning with our students. I'll come back to that one. And then here's just an example of some pedagogical documentation I did for that particular student in using their own money. So this is just what a note looked like. And for my kinders, what I do when I do my ped doc is I would document it using Google Keep. That looks like that. And, oh, sorry, I saw someone said so the activity was to create a bill, if they wanted to. So it was very open-ended. So at Dramatic Play, my students chose to create their own money, because they felt, sorry, I missed that piece. They wanted to create their own money because they were kind of questioning the images on the money. So they thought, well, then, let's create our own money that represents us. So I'm going to put Spider-Man on my coin because I like Spider-Man more than I like a polar bear. So that's sort of where that idea came from. It wasn't the point of the activity, it's just where they took it. And this is an example of, like I said, I documented my students' learning, and I would send this to parents. And I wanted to do it every 2 weeks, but it got kind of challenging to send that feedback, so I'm up to like once a month with my family. And I would write down some next steps for the student after I document their learning. So their next step would be to continue to recognize numbers 10 to 20 and think about concepts of, more or less based on the discussion I had with that student. And I always tell parents when I might send them these photos here, and then what I do is I, document my own learning. I write it up for parents, and I always write a little description of the activity so they know, why is the student making their own money in class? How did that come about? I might say that my students were doing an inquiry around money and images and symbols on money, and then, this is what they did that was interesting during that activity. So we know that form and content are closely related in each medium, and I am mindful of time because I know we're going to finish up at 9, and Michelle wanted to say something before we finish up. And so for example, you know, you might be using Google Hangouts with your students to connect with a class from, you know, another school, and I've done this before, and I'll be doing it this year. I have a colleague who teaches high school, and this year she's teaching a parenting class, and I'm teaching kindergarten, and part of her assignment with her students is, you know, they go through the stages of development, and then when they get to that sort of school age, her students want to plan an activity to do with my students. I'm not sure what that activity is yet because she has to talk to her students, and I have to talk to mine and see where my students are at. But you know, the way in which we use that medium closely, or the way in which the form in which we're using closely, what did I say? Closely informs how we use the medium. So for example, today, you know, like I said, I'm prepping for the presentation today. You know, we had to think very particular about how am I going to communicate this information with you because it's not a face-to-face presentation. So how can I still connect with you using the Blackboard technology? So that's part of why we put those slides at the beginning for you to have a little interaction with, because then we thought, you know what, we're really using we're giving you the content and we're using the form in a very effective way, hopefully. And then Neil did a great lesson, and thank you, Michelle, for posting that What's Your Emoji Name link there. He wrote up a really great lesson on the Association for Media Literacy website about using emojis in really creative ways, so students could actually use emojis to describe themselves. And Neil, I'll have you speak to that piece in a moment, but here's how the lesson looked in kindergarten. And I'm sorry, I tried really hard to find a student who created an emoji, but I couldn't find one in my PED doc because I wanted to put that in for you. But I had different emojis just on, you know, black and white, and we talked about what are emojis, and a lot of my students already knew, you know, it's on my mom's phone, or, you know, I've seen it on the iPad, or whatever it is. And we read a book, The Way I Feel, and this is sort of a series of poems about feelings. So we didn't read the whole book, but we read selected poems. And we figured out, you know, kind of what emoji would go with which poem, and I had the loose parts there. And they were able to, on the little boards here, create their particular emoji. And again, when we think about that belonging and contributing frame and that self-regulation frame, self-regulation and well-being, I found a lot of connections with this lesson. So students were really able to talk to me about their feelings. You know, some of them made sad emojis, happy, angry, and I said, oh, you know, like, I see what's going on here. Tell me about what you made. Oh, I made a sad one because, you know, my mom said I was walking, or my dad said I was walking too slow this morning and my legs hurt when I was coming to school, and now I'm really tired. And I was like, oh, okay. And, you know, that's great because they're sharing a lot of personal things with me, you know, and it helps me to understand maybe where the student's at that particular day. And I find, you know, and I'm new to kindergarten this year, but I find sometimes when I go to think about assessing and noticing and naming the learning for the self-regulation and well-being, sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to get at. I know we're doing that, you know, constantly throughout the day, and we know students might help themselves to snack or whatever it is, but when I think about provocations, intentional opportunities for this, this is, I felt, a really great way to get at that. And we did this center for about 10 days, you know, a bit more than a week. My students were really engaged with it, and I think I'll go back to it. Neil, did you want to talk to that piece at all before we finish up?
I think given the time, we'll just let people go to the lesson itself and have a look.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and it's a pretty fun one. So we actually, Neil just finished teaching the Media Literacy AQ course. So if you're interested in media literacy and you want to learn more about their, you know, we did have an AQ course for it. And this was quite popular in the course, and a lot of people a lot of teachers tried this lesson, and I think their students responded really positively to it. So just flipping through the last few slides here, and these slides will be posted so you can refer to them. I know someone asked me about the rubric for the snack food package. I'd have to look for that. I I have a feeling I'm not sure where it is because I think I did try to find it, but I'll double check that again. Here's a rubric for a recycling project that we did, and again, this was using the app Pic Collage, which is a really great, super easy app that I think is very applicable for primary. I use it a lot in kindergarten and grade 1, and my students had to create recycling sort of posters. So here's an example of the rubric and then the learning goal there for them. And then I just have, I'll go back to that for just a second. And then the next couple slides really are just other fun media literacy projects that you can do. Some I've done, some I've just read about but never done, but most of the ones on the slide deck here I've done. So you can take a look there. Design your own cereal box. That's a oldie but a goldie, so kids love that one. And then just some suggestions for iPad or, oops, I said iPad, I think I was going to write tablet app suggestions, but some of these apps are Android versus, I think most of them might be available on Android, but they are available on iPad, so that you could try with your students that I think relate well to media literacy. And these are in the deck as well, so that you can look at them. Explain everything. That's probably one of my favorites. I think kinders could use it. It has, has a lot of features in the app. So there's some more complicated pieces they can do with older kids, but it's really nice because it records text and video, and you can annotate on top of it. So I'm going to see if Neil wants to say anything, and then that's it for me. I'll put my email in the bottom if anyone has any questions about anything. Please feel free to email me, and I'd be happy to respond back. And I see that Michelle said all links provided for you.
Thanks very much, Chelsea. What you've done so well is to illustrate how some sophisticated ideas of the key concepts can be made very accessible to primary students. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you, Michelle, so much for facilitating with us. It was fabulous. Our session ran without a glitch, and I know that couldn't have happened without you. And thank you very much to the Ontario Teachers Federation for working with the Association for Media Literacy and having us present tonight. I hope I've given you some fun ideas, and please don't hesitate to contact me. I'll be around for the next little bit. Michelle will let you know how long, just to answer any questions. And I'll turn it over to Michelle. So thank you again, guys, and I hope you have fun at school tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, and thank you, Neil, as well. It was really a wonderful presentation, and as you said, it went without a glitch, which is great because it was your first OTF Connects presentation, so always great for a first one. And I love the way you made use of the Blackboard interactive tools early in your presentation, so that was a nice touch. You actually adapted your presentation so that it would fit better with the webinar that we use and the software that we use for webinars for OTF Connects presentation. I also loved very much the synergy going on between the two of you. So this is certainly when the expression the sum is greater than the parts would apply. I think it was truly beneficial to jump back and forth from a more academic perspective to concrete examples in the classroom. And it was definitely a session with tons of extremely useful ideas, examples, and tips. So thank you so much, Chelsea and Niels, once again. And as always, I also want to thank all of you for being such incredibly motivated and creative participants. It's always wonderful to see so many of you, so many teachers taking time away from their families to join us over OTF Connects. as you have seen, Chelsea has prepared lots of links and resources for all of you. I will make sure that they are all included on the web page that will be posted on the RTF Connect's website, on the RTF website, and you will receive an email tomorrow with a link to that website and to the recording of the session. So I just need a few more minutes of your time. It's going to be very, very quick. I'm going to skip over the last slides here. Just to let you know that our OTF 2018 OTF Connect's calendar is jammed with lots of extremely interesting presentations in the coming days and coming weeks. I can't show them all to you, but I just want you to have a look at a few of them that are planned for the coming days. On Thursday, we have an interesting session on self-regulation in the digital age. It's a presentation that I would certainly want my 21-year-old internet addicted boy to watch. I think it would be very beneficial for him. It's presented by Tina Zita, and she's also new to OTF Connect. On January 22nd, we have a session on how to create ideal conditions for creativity to flourish with Garfield Ginny Newman. He's one of our regulars presenters at OTF Connect. On January 24th, a session on pedagogical documentation with Joel Seaman, and he's also new to OTF Connect. I don't know him either. And then I will be back on January 24th moderating a session for Marie-Kay Goindy on planning and teaching math in grade 1 to grade 8. And I'm going to paste quickly in the chat box the links to our calendar and resource page so that you guys have them for tomorrow, for the coming days. I also want to tell you about another opportunity provided by OTF and the Ministry of Education. If you are a qualified teacher and have completed an additional qualification course in mathematics, technology, or kindergarten, you may be eligible for a $450 subsidy. And I'm going to paste that link for you in the chat box so that you can apply for that subsidy. We need your feedback. It's very important to us. When quitting Blackboard, you should be presented with the opportunity to give us your feedback on tonight's presentation and fill a short online questionnaire. And the survey only takes a few minutes. And then after that, you will be redirected to a second page where you can enter your name to obtain a certificate of participation to this training session that you will be able to add to your professional learning resume. However, I have to inform you that these two pages may not appear tonight when quitting Blackboard. And the reason is that OTF moved its entire office and staff today to a new location. And in addition, on top of that, the person that's in charge of setting the feedback survey and certificate for participation has been unwell and has been sick at home for the last few days. So I'm not sure if it's going to work or not because the person in charge wasn't there, but no worries. If it doesn't work, we will send you tomorrow a follow-up email with these links as well as the recording of this session and all the resources that Chelsea has shared with you tonight. So that's it for this evening. I want to, of course, always invite you to follow OTF on social media as well as on our OTF website where you'll find all the information on upcoming sessions. I will now end the recording of the session. Please feel free to remain online if you wish to ask Chelsea or Neil additional questions once the recording has ended. Otherwise, I wish you all a very, very good evening and thank you once again for your participation in tonight's session. We certainly hope to see you soon on the TF Connect. Bonne fin de soirée à tous et à toutes et merci beaucoup.